Honourable Member for St. John's South Mount Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain for the way she summarized the shortfalls in this legislation. She was very thorough and she was eloquent in her speech as well, Mr. Speaker. I've also spoken on this legislation, and some of the immediate weaknesses in this legislation in terms of the absolute liability is the fact that it's not enough. And as the Honourable Member pointed out, there's going to be an increase in absolute liability from $30 million to $1 billion. Now, that's a substantial increase. But when you compare it to other jurisdictions, as the Honourable Member pointed out, like the United States, for example, Mr. Speaker, which has an absolute liability of $12.6 billion, and in the case of the Deepwater Horizon, the 2010 spill in the Gulf of Mexico, which has a total bill so far, a cleanup bill, of $42 billion and rising, you can see, Mr. Speaker, that the $1 billion that this legislation points out is not enough. So I have two questions for the Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain, Mr. Speaker. Number one, do we deserve any less in terms of absolute liability than the United States? That's the first question. And the second question is whether or not the increased liability could enhance the prevention of nuclear accidents or offshore oil and gas accidents, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the question because both parts of that question are spot on. That's exactly what we should be focusing on in this debate. And I want to say, when we had ministry officials, so the minister's own advisors before the committee, I quoted Mr. Labonte before, let me do it again. Here's what he said: recognize that our liability levels were less than our peers, and thus we wanted to keep up. Well, if we wanted to keep up, why are we so far below the liability levels of our peers even now, even under this new legislation? Germany, Japan, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Austria, and Switzerland all have unlimited nuclear liability for nuclear power plants in place already. Even in the U.S., as my colleague just rightly pointed out, the liability limit is $12.6 billion. So if we're taking this opportunity, the first in 40 years, to update this legislation, why not get it right? Why not do what the minister's own officials are suggesting and get us to the same level as our peers? We failed to do that, and I think it's one of the reasons why this bill is deeply, deeply flawed.